3 years ago, Australia elected its largest House of Representatives crossbench in recent history, with 1 in 3 Australians voting for a minor or independent as their first preference. Amongst this crossbench was a group of independents nicknamed the Teals, 6 women who won in previously safe Liberal seats. Named after a colour, supported by the same major donor, and sharing similar values, they may appear to be a united party. However, the Teals, sometimes called community independents, do not share leadership or confine themselves to voting in the same way on parliamentary bills. Not all of them even use the colour teal in their campaign branding. The idea behind the name Teal is that it's a mix of green for environmental focus and blue for being fiscally aligned with the Liberals. Though once entering Parliament, they weren't as financially conservative as expected, with several campaigning for reform to tax, the HECS system and housing affordability. The Liberals are unsurprisingly starkly opposed to the Teals, considering they took several of their safe seats. They endorsed the advertising campaign Teals Revealed by political interest group Advance, which framed the independents as being Greens in disguise. This election, Climate 200 has funded even more candidates than in 2022, with 35 nationwide. Here in Victoria, we've had 2 Teal MPs, Zoe Daniels in Goldstein and Monique Ryan in Kooyoung. Though, eyes are also on the rural Victorian seat Wannon, where independent candidate Alex Dyson made his seat marginal last election. I'm seated here with Dr. Monique Ryan, who has been the MP for Kooyoung for the past 3 years. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great pleasure.
Would you mind please starting by telling me how you believe the Teal wave has changed the dynamic on the crossbench in the last parliamentary term?
Sure. Well, look, it's an interesting thing. So when I stood for election in Kooyoung in 2022, there was no such thing as a Teal. In the last 3 or 4 elections, we've seen a decrease in vote to the major parties. That's been a trend that's been there for quite a long time now, and it's continuing to manifest. So at the last election, about a third of Australians voted for independents or small parties, the Greens or other small parties as well. And that just shows that people are just unsatisfied with the major parties, that the major parties aren't representing them as they want, and that they're looking for a reasonable alternative.
And what have you done in the past 3 years to help young Australians and students?
What I've heard from people in my community is that they're struggling. And when you look at the numbers, fewer young people are starting tertiary degrees or tertiary courses in this country. And one of the issues there was HECS. Started a petition, put a huge amount of pressure on the government to act on that, and they responded.
In the lead up to this election, the Liberal endorsed campaign Teals Revealed have criticised Teal candidates for being overly aligned with Greens. Considering that you voted the same way as Greens leader Adam Bandt on 74% of bills, do you think there's any validity in the Liberals' claims?
I'm not voting for the Greens. Often we're voting in the same way. So yeah, I'm voting with them, but I'm not voting for them. I'm voting with them on climate and environment. But then we're also supporting the government's moves on things like tax reform or making healthcare cheaper. So yeah, we're voting in the same way. That doesn't mean that I'm agreeing. And if that's all the Liberals have got, it's a pretty soft case.
And what about with other Teals? Do you think of yourselves as you're aligned with each other, or do you think yourselves as completely independent from other Teals?
Well, the other community independents came to Parliament with similar sorts of platforms to me. So climate, integrity, transparency in government, gender equity. We go to briefings together because it's easy for groups to give us that information at the same time. I'll listen to the questions that they ask and they'll listen to the questions I ask. And we learn from each other and we work together. I don't want people to think we don't work together. We do. It's a really productive relationship. But at the end of the day, we're all independents.
And why have you chosen to withhold from revealing who you would support in the event of a hung parliament?
That's my opportunity to hold the parties to account. So if I say, no, I'm going to support this person or that person, I lose all my bargaining power. And that's not in the best interest of my electorate.
How has the funding from Climate 200 benefited your campaign? And how have you made sure that with your position, you have helped climate action?
So Climate 200 is a group of people who are really committed to action on climate, who started funding independent campaigns in 2021. And when I first started, it was a community group called Voices of Kooyoung, had no money, literally had to crowdfund for an ad in the paper to look for an independent candidate, which turned out to be me. That seed funding that Climate 200 provided for me was incredibly important, and I don't think I would have succeeded without it. in 2022. What I then did once I was elected was to take action on climate empowerment. We got the first piece of legislation legislating a climate target in this country ever.
2022 was the election where the number of seats won by candidates aside from Labor or the coalition jumped from just 6 to 16. But votes for minor and independent candidates have actually been increasing every election since 2007.